Coming up on our newscast tonight, North Korea pulls out of the Inter-Korean Liaison office in the wake of last month's no-deal Hanoi summit. Pyongyang notified Seoul's Unification Ministry, saying the decision is in accordance with a directive from the higher-ups. President Moon Jae-in wants South Korea to be at the front of the game when it comes to the robotics industry. He vows to nurture 20 global firms and use the sector to create more jobs. Annual shareholders meetings are held for major conglomerates. Shareholders of Hyundai Motor reject the demand by Elliott management for a massive dividend payout and board reforms, while Samsung BioLogics shareholders vote in favor of the company's financial statement and the appointments. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast live from Seoul. I'm Daniel Chan. South and North Korea opened their joint liaison office in September, hoping to keep the communication channel open all day, all year round. Only after half a year, Pyongyang notified Seoul that it's leaving and withdrew right away. Our Unification Ministry correspondent Oh Jung-hee has our top story.
6 months after the Inter-Korean Contact Office was opened, North Korea decides to leave. On Friday, South Korea's Vice Unification Minister Chun Hae-sung, who doubles as the South Korean director of the Liaison Office, gave a briefing about the North's sudden withdrawal. Chun said the North did not give any details about why they decided to pull out.
The North Korean side notified us that they're withdrawing from the liaison office following an instruction from the top. They said they won't care about whether the South Korean side remains at the office. The South Korean government sees the North's such decision as regrettable, and we hope the North can return as soon as possible and operate the liaison office normally.
After giving notice, the North Korean officers left immediately, but they didn't take away any equipment or other items. With the North Koreans gone, the big question was whether the South Korean side will stay. The Vice Unification Chief said that the South Korean liaison officers will remain.
The South Korean side will keep working at the liaison office. We don't see this as the North breaking the summit agreement and won't jump to conclusions, but we'll take time to analyze the situation.
The North's withdrawal comes as the South and North Korean directors of the Joint Liaison Office have not met each other since the beginning of March, and North Korean vice directors have not been present at the office since last week. This had already raised concerns. The liaison office opened last September based on a pledge made at the April 27th summit agreement. It is the first contact office that enabled the two Koreas to communicate easily 24 hours a day. But the pullout raises questions about the range of projects South Korea hopes to carry out with the North, as well as the future of inter-Korean relations. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
At the Cheongwon-dae, the president's top security advisor held a meeting of the National Security Council to discuss North Korea's decision to pull its officials from the liaison office. The NSC's standing committee reportedly discussed ways to minimize the fallout from the withdrawal, as well as how it could impact inter-Korean ties with Pyongyang as well as Pyeongyang-Washington relations. Staying with the North's decision to pull out of the joint liaison office, some analysts call this the first signal the regime sent to both Washington and Seoul since the Hanoi summit. Our Cha Sang-mi turned to some experts for their take on the matter.
The 24-hour year-round communication channel between Seoul and Pyongyang is no more now that North Korea has pulled out from the Inter-Korean Liaison Office. Dr. Ko Myung-yeon says it's a move directed at Washington.
This is a move by North Korea to signal to the United States that the tension in the Korean Peninsula is about to return. North Korea, when it's about to start a cycle of provocation, it tends to start small. And withdrawing this small action of withdrawing from the liaison office in Gaeseong is a typical example of a small provocation that North Korea starts.
And though relations between the two Koreas have been relatively friendly since last year, the signal might be directed at Seoul too.
The fact that North Korea might want to pull out of the diplomatic process, or whether or not it's a signal that it might happen, we don't know. And clearly, it's also a message to South Korea that North Korea is not happy with the current state of diplomacy on the peninsula.
Professor Mason Ritchie says the question is whether this means the Kim regime really is upset about the diplomatic process possibly breaking down, or whether it's another tactic to try and get the U.S. and South Korea to come back to negotiating table with a more conciliatory attitude. The sudden pullout could be connected to how the U.S. has ramped up its sanctions since Hanoi. On the bright side, researcher Cho Han-bum says that if the North were intent on restarting its provocations, it would have done so without warning.
If they wanted to make a radical decision, they would have booted us out, but they allowed the South Korean team to stay. This is a decision that demonstrates the North's complaint America stepping up its sanctions after the Hanoi summit, but they have left room for themselves to go back to the office.
The liaison office in Gaeseong, located near the demilitarized zone, opened on September 14th of last year, following the agreement between Seoul and Pyongyang at their historic Panmunjom summit. It's still too soon to tell whether this is an actual breakdown of diplomacy or not, nor is it clear what the ripple effects will be. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
South Korea's top nuke envoy has returned from his trip to Russia and the EU. He said all sides agreed on the importance of resuming the North Korea-U.S. talks soon.
I had very good talks with Russia and the EU. We agreed that talks between Pyongyang and Washington need to resume soon. And as much as it is a critical time now, we promise to handle the situation together.
On Russia's recent exchanges with the North and whether they discussed the pressure campaign, he said their focus wasn't on that, but on restarting the momentum for talks. Jong-un also pointed out he is aware of the reports of the North Korean leader's possible visit to Russia, adding that he will maintain close communication with Moscow. The nuclear envoy also mentioned he is maintaining close cooperation with Washington and Beijing and will soon visit these countries as well. America has newly listed 2 Chinese shipping companies to its sanctions list for helping North Korea evade such measures. The decision comes after the Hanoi summit fallout, signaling that the U.S. will continue to pressure Pyongyang unless the regime takes denuclearization steps. Kim Mo-gyun explains further.
Washington's new sanctions on Chinese ships doing business with North Korea are the first sanctions since the Hanoi summit collapsed. Over the summit, North Korea allegedly said it wants to take a phased approach in the denuclearization talks, which include the easing of corresponding sanctions related to people's everyday lives. To this, the U.S. had been claiming that sanctions will not be removed until steps towards complete denuclearization are taken. An expert says that Washington's latest sanctions could be seen as the Trump administration's determination to push through with its hardline policy.
So I think what now the U.S. is doing is to bring international community to come and implement these sanctions on North Korea seriously so that there will be no loopholes of sanctions on North Korea.
The expert also said that it could be Washington's way of pressuring China to do its part.
If China does not stop and doing any kinds of secret trade with the North Korea, provide oil to North Korea, there will be a tremendous outcome in the trade agreement with trade discussions and coordinations with the United States.
The latest announcement came a day after U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton told Breitbart News that China could hold the key to the sanctions implementation issue if they press North Korea hard enough, pointing at Beijing's high contribution to North's external trade. Kim Mo-gyun, Arirang News.
Washington also updated a list of suspicious ships involved with the regime. One of them is a South Korean vessel. Lee Ji-won fills us in on the latest.
Amid concerning reports that North Korea has been able to elude both UN and U.S. sanctions via illicit ship-to-ship transfers, the U.S. Treasury Department announced Thursday that it's sanctioning 2 Chinese shipping companies for helping the regime get around the sanctions. Those firms are Dalian Haibo International Freight and Liaoning Danxing International Forwarding. The Treasury Department says Dalian Haibo provided goods and services to or in support of Pexo Trading Corporation, a North Korean entity previously sanctioned for possibly providing revenue for the regime by trading in metal and coal. The firm is understood to be an arm of the North Korean state.
The other Chinese company, Liaoning, which did transportation business in North Korea, used what the U.S. called deceptive practices that helped North Korean officials in Europe buy goods for the regime. The firm is being investigated by the UN Security Council's expert panel on suspicions of shipping the North Mercedes-Benz limousines. In a related move, the Treasury Department has also updated its advisory on North Korea's illicit shipping practices to indicate the waters in which recent ship-to-ship transfers occurred and the ports these ships call in before and afterwards. They include South Korean cities of Yeosu, Gwangyang, and Busan. The advisory also added 18 ships suspected of exporting North Korean coal or oil, believed to have engaged in ship-to-ship transfers with North Korean tankers, one of which is the Lunis, identified as a South Korean vessel. To this, Seoul's Foreign Affairs Ministry says that the Lunis is a ship Seoul and Washington have been keeping their eyes on, and that they will thoroughly investigate whether the ship violated the UN sanctions. It also added that it will keep local firms aware of Washington's guidance for member states and companies to avoid illicit maritime trade with North Korea. 이지원, Arirang News.
South Korea is actively applying robotics in various areas, mainly in the manufacturing sector. According to President Moon Jae-in, the country has a potential to be a global leader of the field. Park Hee-jun shares with us his remarks.
South Korea will become one of the top 4 countries in the robotics industry within the next 5 years. President Moon Jae-in announced that ambition on Friday in the city of Daegu, the 7th stop of his nationwide economic tour that began last year. Meeting with around 300 government officials, business leaders, and scholars working in robotics, the president expressed confidence that South Korea will become a first mover in the industry.
정부는 사람을 위한 로봇 산업이라는 원칙 아래 2023년 로봇 산업 글로벌 4대 강국을 목표로 삼았습니다. 작지만 강한 세계적인 스타 기업 20개를 만들어낼 것입니다.
According to Minister of Trade, Industry and Energy, Song Yun-mo, who was also at the event, the government will work to scale up the industry to $13 billion. President Moon also reassured the nation's workers that the growth of robotics will not take away their jobs, but instead create new ones. The president says robots are already boosting productivity and profits, resulting in the creation of jobs in the R&D sector and for young people. He says the government will first deploy robots to areas where the work environment is harsh or companies are short-handed, also to raise the productivity of small and mid-sized companies and guarantee the safety of employees. For example, the clothing and food and beverage sectors will get around 7,500 robots to lend them a helping hand. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
The nation's largest automaker held its annual shareholders meeting. They voted on Hyundai Motor Group's dividends payout and board member shakeup. Kim Hae-sung has the highlights from that session.
The shareholders of Hyundai Motor Group have rejected a demand by the American activist hedge fund Elliott management for a massive dividend payout and board reforms. 86% of Hyundai Motor shareholders voted in favor of Hyundai Motor and Hyundai Mobis's proposal of a dividend payout for 2018 of $1 billion, turning down Elliott's calls for a one-time payout of $7 billion. Only 14% of them voted with Elliott, which owns 3% of Hyundai Motor and 2.6% of Hyundai Mobis. So it's a win for Hyundai after it was forced to withdraw a controversial restructuring plan last year because of opposition from Elliott, and it leaves more money to invest in future technologies. Also passed was Hyundai Motor's proposal to bring in 3 outside directors, including Vice Chairman of UBS Wealth Management, Yoon Chi-won. They all won over 70% of the vote.
Elliott knew it wouldn't have been able to pass this proposal, but it's trying to show that its demands are in the shareholders' interests. 14% in favor, though. This is not a small number. Unlike the past, Korean chaebol shareholders, both foreign and local, are getting bigger and calling for changes to corporate governance and improvements in transparency.
On Friday, Hyundai Motor Group's Executive Vice Chairman Jong Il-sun, Co-President Lee Won-hee, and Head of R&D Albert Bierman have been approved to serve as executive directors, paving the way for Jong Il-sun to take over as group chairman from his father, Chung Mong-gu. But experts say Hyundai Motor still faces the bigger challenge of revamping its ownership structure, a process that is attracting closer scrutiny from Elliott and other investors. 김혜성, Arirang News.
Shareholders voted in favor of Samsung BioLogics' key proposals despite the National Pension Service's opposition, citing the firm's alleged accounting fraud. At the company's annual shareholders meeting, shareholders approved the financial statement and the appointment of inside and outside executives. Samsung BioLogics president vowed to continue winning more contracts for biopharmaceutical research and production. The National Assembly held its final interpellation session today with a focus on education, culture, and social affairs. Up for debate was the fine dust issue. The ruling party welcomed the establishment of a new national fine dust agency, calling on the government to cooperate with China in dealing with the problem. Beijing has been a key contributor to the country's poor air quality. But the opposition parties stepped up their attacks, claiming there's been a lack of countermeasures from the government. Also on the table was the celebrity sex and drug scandal surrounding the Burning Sun nightclub. Rival parties called for a thorough investigation into all allegations, including cozy ties between celebrities and law enforcement. Today is World Water Day, an international observance highlighting the importance of sustainable water resources. President Moon Jae-in attended a ceremony to mark the occasion in Daegu. He highlighted the rapid growth of the water industry driven by the Fourth Industrial Revolution and vowed to spare no effort in supporting companies with promising technologies.
현재 물산업 세계시장 규모는 7천억 불이 넘고 2022년까지 연평균 4% 이상의 성장을 보일 것으로 전망됩니다. 정부는 기술 경쟁력을 갖춘 물기업의 세계시장 진출을 전략적으로 지원할 것입니다.
The South Korean leader also stressed the importance of tackling the growing dangers of climate change and natural disasters. He said the government will work to ensure a stable water supply by strengthening dams and drainage, as well as funding rural areas so they can maintain their water supply systems. Here in the nation, it's West Sea Defense Day. A special ceremony was held to honor the soldiers who lost their lives defending their country against North Korean attacks. Kim Ji-yeon takes us to the scene.
It's the fourth year that South Korea has commemorated the West Sea Defense Day at the Daejeon National Cemetery. South Korea holds the day on the fourth Friday of March every year to commemorate the 55 soldiers who gave their lives for their country during a series of North Korean provocations. Those include the torpedo attack on the Cheonan warship in 2010, the shelling of Yeonpyeong Island later that year, and the Second Battle Yeonpyeong in 2002, which was turned into a movie in 2015 called Northern Limit Line, after the disputed maritime demarcation line in the West Sea separating the two Koreas.
I wanted to be here after seeing the movie Northern Limit Line. I was touched by the soldiers' sacrifice, and I thought that participating in the ceremony would be a great way to honor them.
Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun offered his condolences during the ceremony and says South Korea owes it to the soldiers and their families to create an everlasting peace on the Korean peninsula.
It's been more than 70 years since the division of the two Koreas, and the West Sea has felt the most pain and tensions following North Korea's intermittent provocations. But since last year, the sounds of gunshots have abated on the Korean peninsula following the series of inter-Korean summit meetings.
The two Koreas signed the Comprehensive Military Agreement last year, aimed at suspending hostile military acts and tensions as part of their common goal of building peace on the Korean peninsula and the air and sea around it. President Moon Jae-in also sent a message toward Twitter that the country will forever remember the soldiers and will no longer forgive any more provocations from the North, and that South Korea will counter force with greater force. But if there's a chance to win without confrontation, the president says he'll take the peaceful path. The West Sea Defense Day serves as a reminder of the sacrifices made to protect South Korea. This year, it was also a day to underscore that the soldiers' sacrifices were not in vain and that it would someday lead to a peaceful Korean peninsula. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News, Daejeon.
Moving on to other stories now, with the ongoing investigation into the Burning Sun scandal, President Moon not only wants a thorough investigation of that case, he ordered the prosecution to launch a probe to reveal the truth behind some past cases, including one from a decade ago involving an actress and her suicide note. Lee Min-sun has the full story.
In March 2009, 29-year-old actress Jang Ja-yeon killed herself. She left a 7-page letter which detailed the sexual crimes committed against her. In the letter, Jang accused her agent of forcing her to attend drinking parties and provide sexual favors to 31 high-profile figures from the entertainment industry, press, and corporate and political fields. The police investigated 17 people from the list, but they were all dismissed due to lack of evidence. Only her agent was punished for assault and intimidation, raising suspicions about the thoroughness of the investigation.
Realistically, it's not easy to investigate high-profile people just because their names appeared on the list. It would require evidence or very specific accounts from witnesses, so a thorough investigation of those people would have been difficult at the time.
Jang's case resurfaced last year when actress Yoon Ji-woo, who was the only witness in the investigation into Jang's case, gave testimony in public.
I need a lot of advice on whether to mention the names I saw on the list, and I will do what I can to verify the truth.
The 6-month probe launched by the prosecution last year was extended until May this year.
The probe is focused on verifying whether the investigation was conducted poorly at the time. If the conclusion requires re-investigation, it will be done on cases within the remaining statute of limitations. But the probe may face some difficulty since it doesn't have legal force.
Although the statute of limitations has passed for most charges, the experts think a thorough probe to find the truth is a necessary step for legal authorities to regain trust. Lee Min-sun, Arirang News.
There was a time when Koreans strictly believed a couple must tie the knot to live together. These days, however, more and more people here in the nation believe cohabitation before marriage is perfectly acceptable. Kim Da-mi takes a closer look into this trend.
The data have shown for some time that fewer South Koreans are getting married to their life partners, but now it appears more than half of South Koreans think it's okay to live together before tying the knot. A survey by Statistics Korea found that around 48% of people felt that way in 2016, but the survey conducted again last year found that the number had risen to 56%, the first time it's been a majority. That number was especially high among the younger generation and highest among those in their 20s.
Younger people nowadays don't want to belong to that patriarchy, which many older people believe in, especially when it comes to marriage. This shows that Korean society's perception of marriage and family are changing.
So, marriage is apparently no longer a must for many Koreans. In 2018, less than half of Koreans said getting married is something people have to do, a figure that's gradually declined since 2010. The data also analyzed life expectancy for 52 million South Koreans. Average life expectancy in 2017 was 82 years, up 0.3 years from a decade earlier. Especially notable was shrinking gap in between the sexes. For men, it was around 80 years, while for women, it was around 86 years. The gap has continued to narrow since 1980 thanks to medical technology. The shrinking gap in life expectancies between the genders is a phenomenon that's been observed in other developed countries as well. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
Hello, Michelle Park here with the latest weather update. A low pressure system will gradually soak the nation in the afternoon tomorrow with similar chilly conditions as today. Now, Beijing and Pyongyang, on the other hand, will enjoy a nice sunny spell. And most provinces will receive less than 5 millimeters of precipitation, While some regions, such as Gangwon province, have a chance to see some combination of rain and snow. Now also you may witness loud thunder and lightning as well. Now here's what you can expect in the morning. Seoul will have another low start to the day at 0 degrees Celsius, while Daegu starts the day at 3 degrees and Gyeongju at 2. The afternoon high in Seoul will stay cool at 9 degrees, while Busan and Jeju will rise higher at 14 and 12 degrees respectively. From Sunday, afternoon temperatures will soar back into the seasonal average, and by Wednesday, the daily high in Seoul will peak into the mid-teens. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we got back into tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Thank you for staying with us. Have an incredible weekend.